Good morning, Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We on the top of page 1462. Aleph Tov Samach Beis. So, summing up what we've learned. Shcheda Ani V'Nova. The soul is speaking. The soul below on earth here is speaking to Bnei Yerushalayim, the daughters of Yerushalayim. The neshama says they are above, or even its own very neshama as it is in a more deeper level, not affected by this world. That Shcheda Ani, I am dark and concealed by all the halamas v'astadium of the body and animal soul and of this very world. And yet, V'Nova, I'm beautiful. And that beauty surpasses even the exalted beauty and greatness of the souls as they are above. Because down below, where it's dark, that's what generates and triggers the profound thirst, what he called tekev harotze, and yearning and longing to connect to godliness, and also an awareness, appreciation of how Etz Atzmus is beyond everything, including understanding that all the levels above, including Bnei Yerushalayim, including Atzilus, and all the highest Giluyim, are all in a state of midbar v'shmamen. They're all essentially lifeless and desolate compared to the source, the life of all life, Atzmus, as we learned. Because at the end of the day, all those Giluyim receive their energy from the source. And that's what the neshama below comes to recognize and realize, and in many ways also elevates all those levels as well, because it brings that awareness to all Seder Shtalshus. The Rebbe Rashab didn't explicitly say that here, but he said it earlier. Okay. And this explains Uba Midbar Asher Isa. And the Midbar, as the Zohar says, reading from page 1460, that they are Midbar Boyim L'Bchinas Riyah. That after the midbar below, where it's concealed, you come to a deeper state of riyah, perception, and resonance. Because, as I said, when you contemplate how everything down below, we come to realize that everything is in the letter of midbar shmamim. Quoting the Likutei Torah by midbar, with the explanations that he added on pages 1460 and 1461. Right. Okay. And that's what the Pasuk says as well. He says, Ru'u ato ki anihu, and the Zohar says on that's Atzmus, that's higher than Keser, that la'asid love, in the future we're going to come to that highest level of perception, of Riyah, what he calls v'nichya lefanov. So it says, Yechayenu biyamayim, will be energized biyamayim. Yamayim refers to 2 days, 2 levels, Mamala Kalaman, and Sevav Kalaman, imminent, the divine that manifests within existence. Sevav Kalam is the divine that transcends existence. But then you'll come b'yem hashlishi, that's the highest level, v'nichya lefanov. And lefanov he interprets as being Atzmus itself. Riyah samuhus, that we will not just know about Atzmus, but actually perceive and experience it as if we're seeing today, as we look at something today with our physical eyes. However, that's Lasid Lave. Mashenken Achshav, meaning before the Geula, we can still become aware of it, and we have a thirst toward it. Semoyen Love Lebchinas Madregazu. We've come to the thirst by coming down to this world and feeling the distance and feeling the concealment. We come to thirst and long for this level. The Bechina of Riyah Chushis. Kamoitzama Nafshi Lelakim, the Kel Chai Mosai Avai Ve'era. My soul is thirst to you, a godliness, God, the Kel Chai, the living God, like we're speaking about, the source of life. Mosai Avai, when will I arrive? When will I reach the Era and see you? That's what we experience now. And Idea Semayin, I'm reading the last line we learned, the top of page 1462. Idea Semayin, Nimshach Idea Zebchinas Ariyah. So we see from the Midbar through the Semayin, it draws that level of Riyah. First as a thirst to it, and then it will be fulfilled in the Geula itself when we'll actually experience it in the fullest sense of the word. And that's where we stopped, even though I read the next line, but I said I'll stop there, and then we'll continue from top of page 1462. So the Rebbe Rashab is tying together many, many themes that we've learned earlier, and I've already summed this up a number of times, so I don't know if I have to do it again. But till the end of this page, where we are now, 1462, is going to conclude something till he goes back to something he started discussing back on page 1350, when he talked about the interface Mamayl Lamata. But we'll get to that. That's the next page. Just wanted to point out the lay of the land where we are right now. So the Rebbe Rashab is tying together the knots about how down below Dafka we experience the highest levels. So this very much goes hand in hand, as I explained in the last class, with the concept of Einoid. Not just Tavayu Elakim, Einoid, which is only experienced down B'chalol Shalelam, as he cites from the Medrash, only in the Chalol Shalelam, in this world, that we come to experience Einoid, which is the highest level of Helam Atzmi. And in general, how about Atzmos that only we experience down here, where the higher levels reveal and help us see, like, light that helps the eye see, but ultimately the eyes below will reach places that all the highest Giluyim cannot reach on their own. So everything has its role, and they all complement each other, obviously. So in simple terms, the neshama has to direct and guide the soul. The neshama has to direct and guide the body, as long as the body is blind and does not see godliness. But then in turn, as we learned much earlier as well, the body will teach something to the soul and nourish and nurture the soul, the neshama nizunas and the guf, because the body ultimately reveals a level of atzmus that the neshama itself does not reveal in its geluyim. It's connected to it, but it doesn't reveal it quite as much until it comes down below in a state of shcheirani, where it's darkened. So with that, let's continue top of page 1462, literally the first line. And the pages can be found if you want to follow the text at ayinbeis.com. It continues and says like this: like it says in the Siddur always, whenever it says Siddur Chassidus, it means the Siddur that the Mittler Rebbe composed and published, which is called Siddur Imdach, is the actual official name. Siddur with Chassidus. She has a Siddur, a whole Siddur, with all the, not just morning, afternoon, evening prayers, but also Yom Tovim and other sections as well. And in the Siddur that the Mittler Rebbe did, he collected all the Maimorim that his father, the Alter Rebbe, said that relates to statement phrases in the prayers, and put it into one sefer. And most of them are his own Hanochas that he himself wrote, what he heard from his father, so it's usually a little more elaborate. And we can trace it. Today, there are the newest editions of the Siddur have all the footnotes that tell you exactly when these Maimorim were said and where they're printed in other places. So today there's actually a new edition that's really excellent, very, very thorough, that really covers that. In case you just as an aside.
What's it called?
Siddur Imdach. Mittler Rebbe Siddur Imdach. If you look Siddur in any of the Sfarim of Chassidus, Siddur Imdach is an acronym for Divrei Elikim Chaim. Daled Aleph Ches.
Okay, Kehos will have it.
Yep. It's today 2 volumes, well annotated. Yeah. Basically, if anything you want in davening, you want to know Chassidus, the beer of Chassidus Chabad, it's pretty much there. But it'll also refer to other places if it's not there. As I mentioned, the Siddur includes all kinds of sections, and one of them is Reish Chedesh. So he talks about this there. Ubelakut Teira and Lakut Teira b'dibra maskul v'hoya midah chedesh b'chadoshe. Look the Torah of the Alter Rebbe. In the Maimer that begins, so what do they discuss? They discuss a Maimer Chazal. So Maimer Chazal in I believe it's in Tainus, maybe. Yeah, I think so. That the Inyan Shemesh b'Shabbos Tzedakah la'aniyim. That's what the Gemara says. Shemesh as in the sun. The sun shines b'Shabbos and Tzedakah la'aniyim. Now the Mefarshim all comment, what exactly does this mean? So there's many interpretations, but we'll talk about it how Chassidus, how this, he's going to explain it one way. And where is it based on? The Ksiv, it says in the Pasuk. I'm just looking the actual source. Yeah, the Tainis Ches Beis and Malachi. What does the Pasuk say? V'zorcha lachem yirei shmi. V'zorcha lachem. Zorcha means the shine. To yirei shmi, to those that are revere my name, God's name. What will shine to them? The Pasuk says, Shemesh Tzedakah u'merapeh. Become feha. Shemesh Tzedakah u'merapeh, and it heals, become feha with its wings. So he's going to explain now what this means. This is what's explained in Siddur and Likutei Torah. We'll see the connection to what we're learning here in a moment. The Knesset Yisrael, B'yamei Sachel, Knesset Yisrael essentially means the community, the gathering of Israel. It's really referring to Neshamas Yisrael. The body of Neshamas Yisrael, community of Neshamas Yisrael of Israel. B'yamei Sachel, in the weekdays, Heim B'chinas Chelas Ava. They're in a state of love sickness. We've learned about this in the end of volume 2. Chelas Ava means we're sick with love, which means the love is in a way ravaging the person and making them ill. It could be seen as a positive, it could be seen as a negative. In other words, when the person is neutral, they're neutral. But when you're very hungry and very thirsty, you can become sick. And same thing, love. When there's deep love for something and you can't gain it and you're lacking it, so there's a state of chelas ava, that you're like you say, love is sick for the love sickness. Samchuni ba'ashishus. Ki chelas ava oni. Samchuni ba'ashishus, we also learned, ashishus refers to the apple orchard. The samchuni, support me in the apple orchard because chelas ava oni. Because I am sick with love. So basically, please nurture me, essentially. And we learned earlier what's the ashishus, what does apple have to do with it? But it's all, that's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Like it says elsewhere. I can refer you where this is exactly. It's the last mimer, I believe, in volume 2. Let me just refer, because you spoke about it there. Might as well look it up. I think it's the last mimer, I'm almost sure. Yeah, page 1195. 1195 is where he began speaking about it. Actually, I'm sorry. Samchuni bashishus, ashishus, I believe refers to the wine, and then he says ravduni betapuchim. Yeah, I confused it. So basically, he said there that it's a maimer of Knesset Yisrael, Malchus, that is yearning and longing to its beloved. Yeah, mamish, what we're learning here, to reach a level that's higher than Seviv Mamala, Ashisha Yayin. Yeah, Ashisha, the vines of wine, that's what it's yearning for, that's Ashishus. So that's what he talks about there. If you want to look it up, look at page 1195, and the pages that follow talk about Chelas Ava. Regardless, he's talking that Yemei Sachel, when we don't have the Shabbos energy, so the neshamas are in a state of this type of thirsting, because Chelas Ava, Shazeu, this yearning, this longing, which is a deep longing, because it's like feeling like you're really lacking to the point you're becoming sick from the fact. And remember, sick here doesn't mean, God forbid, like a disease or illness. It means a real anguish due to the lack. You say Moshe Rabbeinu reached 49 gates of Bina, but not the 50th gate. So 49 is gematria chayla. Chayla is gematria 49. Explains that there as well, back in volume 2. So Moshe Rabbeinu, because he didn't have the 50th gate, so he felt that lack in a very profound way, and that's memtes chayla. So he says like this: Shazel min ha'izbonenus. Where does this level of profound love coming from? It's coming from the contemplation. Eich shayeshu hepech ha'ayin. I believe this is all what's explained in Siddur and Likutei Torah. When a person contemplates that the yesh below, where we reside, is opposite of ayin. Ayin refers to a complete state of nullification, or you can say complete absorption in the source. Yesh is a self-contained identity. It's about the individual, the ego. So he said the kol yesh behechrich shisavusei ma'ayin. The contemplation is saying like this: every yesh you have to say is coming from a state of ayin. We learned this earlier, that nothing creates itself. So if something exists, where did it come from? So there are things that exist like cause and effect, yesh mi yesh, or ayin ma'ayin. That's when there's commensurate levels. But the yesh indicates that it had to be created. That means it comes from a state of a more mysterious state that's not in the world of yesh. So you have to say the yesh came from a state of ayin. She'ena b'chinas mitzias. The yesh is a mitzias, is an identifiable substance and existence. It comes from a state of ayin. Furthermore, ube'emes, and in truth, kol mitzias hayesh, it doesn't just come from a state of ayin. The whole existence of the yesh, huraka ayin amava yiseh. It's only the ayin that creates it, like we learned earlier as well from Shar Yichud V'Amunah. Now, what really defines existence? Is it the matter, or is it the energy that's energizing the matter? So, as he says in Tanya, in Shar Yichud V'Amunah, that's really everything in existence is just the yesh, is the divine energy that's sustaining it. And if it was for 1 second removed, everything would cease to be. But we don't feel this. This comes through contemplation. Ubayesh ein ze nire klal. In the yes, all this is not nire. It's not obvious. It's not felt. It's not sensed. We don't experience it. We logically come to that conclusion. So ein nire is excited. Adarabah. On the contrary, what do we feel and what do we see? Adarabah. Who b'chinas atekev hayeshes v'amitzias. The yesh is in a very intense, involved in its own sense of its own identity, its own existence, take of yeshes, its own so-called identity, yeshes, and mitzias existence, and on its own, it actually conceals on the divine ayin, the divine energy within it. It's like a glove that has a hand within it, but we don't feel or see the hand. And therefore, when the shaman below contemplates on this, that number one, that we come from a state of ayin. Furthermore, we are actually, that is our essential energy. And point 3, it's all concealed. All that adds up to I don't want to call it lethal, but all that adds up to tremendous angst that is going to create that thirst and that chelasava. The chafetz u'mishtekek me'ed, this neshama, as it's contemplating on this, how he is in the state of yesh, similar to what he spoke earlier, shcheirani, in a state of shcheirani, that it's all concealed. So the mizbonenus creates a chayfetz, a desire, a mishtekek, and a longing, a craving, a yearning, ma'id, an extensive one. Sheyegili ha'ayin bayesh. He wants to have the gili ha'ayin bayesh. It'd be like when you really come to realize that everything you're experiencing is only a superficial state. And you want to, and you really sense and know in your mind that there's something much more going on here. Like you see, for example, sometimes even children, you see something and on the outside level, and then you want to open up the curtain to see what's going on inside. And if you come to a real hisbonenus and understand what's inside is really the truth of everything, it becomes almost a desperate act. I mean, desperate in a positive way. It's not new. You're not you're not complacent about it. You really, really want to know what is making things tick. What's going on beneath the curtain, behind the curtain, beneath the surface. So that's chafetz u'mishtekek me'ed. That means really strongly desires and really is longing to know the gili ha'ayin b'hayesh. So all this is explaining the chelas hava, which is coming to explain the simoyin that we have today to reach that level. Obviously, this is predicated on a true contemplation. Most of us don't have this because we're pretty much comfortable in our world. He's describing, however, somebody that becomes uncomfortable because of this deep longing, the deep longing as a result of really appreciating this. This is what we talk about Chassidim or Rabbeim, when they were in a state of real deep immersion and contemplation during davening or other times, and they come to this profound. The Alter Rebbe at times, when he davened, or even when he said a mimer, sometimes roll on the floor. So we're talking about individuals who reach these very deep states of longing that actually physically affect them. So I know we could all say we'll never reach that state, but as I said a number of times, this is all about everyone finding in their particular way, on their level. So I can't say you don't reach necessarily the Alter Rebbe's level, but you can definitely, in your own level, relatively speaking, you can be more complacent, you can be less complacent. You can have a strong taiva to learn chassidus and understand what's really going on, but it's more than just understanding, as you see here, it's really leading to a ava, to the point of chelas ava. So the Rebbe Rashab is laying out the whole picture and the highest levels of it. I'm just explaining how this is all relevant to all of us, each on our own particular level. But let's go back to what he's saying. He didn't finish yet. So chafetz v'shteikin me'ed sheyagila ayin b'hayesh. Actually, I will stop here, pause here, if anybody wants to ask anything, and then we'll continue the hisbonenus that he's referring to that leads a person to this deep tzemoyin and thirst. So I just want to say one more thing. The shcheir ani is two sides to it. One side is that's actually concealed, and the soul does not feel on its own, as we see on a regular daily basis. We see how we are, who we are, and what state we're in. But the second half of it is, that becomes the catalyst, as we've been discussing, the trigger that motivates and stimulates us to want to seek. So that's why the shcheira becomes vanova when a person seeks. So it's not automatic, but it is the darkness of this world that does propel us to these higher states of consciousness and thirst and so on. Just wanted to make sure that that's spelled out very explicitly, even though it's pretty obvious. But let me pause here if anybody wants to clarify or ask anything. Okay. So continuing on, v'chein, Rabbi Rashab says, v'chein, and so too, me'izbonus b'koyach ha'ein sof. It's another hisbonus, another contemplation. Then you contemplate the koyach ha'ein sof, the power of Ein Sof, the infinite power of God. Shebi savus, that is found in creation, or in bringing creation into being. Ubanhoga hatmidis. So we learned earlier, he's just here saying it very briefly. You see the koyach Ein Sof in a few ways. One is the very fact that existence exists. So you have to say there's a koyach Ein Sof that's bringing it into existence. And then there's another thing, the fact that existence is perpetual and it does not waver. Doesn't waver. Hanoga tmidis is that the sun rises every morning and the moon in the evening, and the whole flow of existence. Lo yishbesu is the expression in Pasha Noach, that nothing ceases. You don't see anything weaken. You throw a stone, it'll fly 100 feet, 200 feet, but then it'll finally fall. Everything a human being does, because we're mortals, so the energy is limited, finite. So whatever that energy generates will ultimately dissipate. But you look at a world and you don't see it dissipating, you don't see it weakening. You see it in the same intensity, day after day, and so on. So we learned earlier that Hanoga Tmidis means there's a koyach Ein Sof that's pushing it, because it doesn't have power of its own. This mortal physical world is a finite world. Where does it have the power to go forever like that, with that type of intensity? So that's one of the indicators. The hisbonenus, when we misbein on that, that tells us the koyach ein sof. So he's just referring to that, relying that we learned in detail earlier what that means. So when you're mizbein on this koyach ein sof, that brings existence into being, and hanogat midis, uba midis, in this perpetual, continuous motion or the governing of existence, anhoga, that's continuously rolling like a machine that's always alive and never rests, and it stays consistent. So the first is bonus, which was that the yesh comes from ayin, and the true energy of the yesh is the ayin, and this bonus now of keich and so. All this is asoga gemura. This is not just faith. This is a complete comprehension. Ki'ilu roya mamish. When you contemplate it properly, it's as if you're seeing it mamish. What does he mean? Obviously, it does not mean like la'asud love, because not la'asud love. We're talking about now. He even said that's Yemesh Achel. But he means that you contemplate on it in depth. It's like when you talk, for example, sometimes if you ever talk to a physicist, or remember hearing a speech from Richard Feynman, or Albert Einstein, or these people who are completely immersed, they speak about it with such a sparkle in their eye. I'm just giving you an example. It's as if they see the subatomic particles, as if they see a black hole. And we know they're not seeing it, but when they're so immersed in it, and there's so much rational thinking that led them there, it's as if they're seeing it mamish. I'm using a completely secular example to point out that when you contemplate on something long enough, it's as if you see it. That's what he wants to say. You could contemplate it very superficially on surface level, so obviously then it's just a theory. But there comes a point where you can actually become passionate about it, even though you're not physically seeing with your eye, but it's as if ki'ilu roya mamish. That's what Hasaga Gemura leads us to. U'kamishn is bar le'il, as we learned earlier in the Maimer Dibra Maskal Laman Das. The Maimer Laman Das, he refers to that, volume 2, page 684, where he discusses how Hasaga Mamish, when you contemplate on these things, it brings you the Hasaga Gemura rather brings you to as if you're seeing it. He says ki'ilu, doesn't say roya mamish, ki'ilu. It's a state of awareness. It's just like you have people chacham ezu chacham areyas haneled. You show, for example, someone who has a lot of experience, let's say a graph, a financial graph, or some other or an X-ray. You see experts, they look at an X-ray and they suddenly see something no one else sees. Not because they're miracle makers, because they have so much experience, they see patterns where others won't see patterns. And any area of expertise, you put together a few things, some of us just see the dots, and some right away connect the dots. Just examples of what means ki'ilu roya mamish, when you have that level of understanding of something, and with experience that comes with time and so on. So he says, okay, so all that is sogmur roya mamish. Okay, that's what we learned there. But now he wants to bring it back to our discussion here. I have to look inside the Siddur and Likutei Torah, but I'm assuming, I don't want to say conclusively unless until I look into it, but I'm assuming he's bringing this as an example to bring it back to the Tzemoyin, because you'll see in the next line how he explained the language. You see that's not quite the same way here. But what do we derive from everything we just learned from the top of the page? That the state of chelas ava comes min haizbananus, from the hizbananus of the soul below, in the yesh coming from the ayin, and being the very essence of it is the ayin, the hizbananus of koyach ein sof. And all that leads to a deep perception into something. It's still not the thing itself, but it's still a deep perception. So he says now like this, now that we've learned what we learned there, according to what he's saying here, we have another way of reaching this state of awareness. And what is that? In these Maimorim that he just quoted, it doesn't talk about the Tzemoyin. He talks about the chelas ava, but he talks it's coming not due to the thirst, it's coming due to the contemplation. So even though there's a chelas ava and the contemplation leads to a deep longing, But here the focus is more on the tzimoyin itself. So he says, so here, it's from the intense thirst. That sama nafshi, like remember the last line on the previous page, he brought the pasuk, sama nafshi lelakim, lekel chai, masay avai ve'ere. So that's what he brings now again. When will I arrive? When will I come and see and perceive and experience you? Pnei Elikim, the face of God, the level of Chinas Ha'atzmus, the Ein Sof, the Hu Chayecha Amiti. So here, the focus is not so much on the contemplation, but on the thirst. Well, maybe I should rephrase that. I want to rephrase that. I think here is also a contemplation, because remember, the thirst is a result of that whole understanding that we are here in a place where we don't feel godliness. However, I think what he's focusing, Simoyin also has an element that when you feel the darkness a lot, it creates a lot of thirst. The contemplation he was talking was not so much feeling the darkness, it's more appreciating that there's an ayin inside this yesh. So I think it's not a contradiction. The Lafia Mavur Khan just is simply saying that different Maimorim, there's a different emphasis. So you can emphasize the understanding of wanting to connect to the ayin within the yesh, reveal that ayin within the yesh. But then there's more the cheshek part where you're feeling the thirst, and that's the focus, the thirst itself, to see godliness, to see atzmus ain't atzmus, because like we learned before, hu chayecha amiti. He's your true life source. Remember we said not just life source, he's true life. What is true emes and chayim is only atzmus. And that's what we're longing here for through the tzimoyin. So I have to, again, look in those maimorim, but I would say that there's a few different differences here. When you have mizbayim, for example, the ayin and the yesh, ayin is not atzmus necessarily. Ayin could be an ayin eliki oyer, that the oyer, compared to the yesh, is ayin, and you're looking for that ayin. That's number one. Number two, tzimoyin is not so much the emphasis there. There's the more the emphasis of appreciating what is going on behind the curtain, so to speak. And you want to access that. Whereas here, there's more emphasis on the tzimoyin of the thirst, what the lack thereof. But I think that both of them need each other. And it's also not just to the ayin, it's also to the atzmus. The main focus that you want to have, the chayecha hamiti. That's the Shama Nafshi called Mosai Ovever Pnei Elikim Atzmus Ein Sof. But Al Yedei HaTzimoyin, going back now to the original piece, and through the thirst, through this thirst, Hine Shemesh b'Shabbos Stokel Aniyim. That brings a level of Shemesh b'Shabbos and Stokel Aniyim, which means the b'Shabbos Meir b'Chines Shemesh Havaya. So on the weekdays, he said it's chelas ava because it's concealed and therefore love sickness. But through the tzimoyin, you arrive to the place of experiencing shemesh b'Shabbos, shemesh havaya, the revelation of Shabbos. Does he explain stokel aniyim? I don't know. Maybe he will. Yes, he does. He'll soon explain that. So again, I have to look into the sources. But he's clearly combining both elements here, because he is referring now back to the Shemesh l'Shabbos and Zdokal Aniyim. So I have to look exactly what he means by Lafia Mavur Khan. Is he comparing that to the concept of the Yesh and Ayin, or also to the Maimorim of the Sidon L'Kutei Torah? So I'll get back to you on this. I have to research it a bit more. But bottom line is that Tzimoyin now is leading to something. It leads to some type of satiation of the soul's thirst, and that's the shemesh b'Shabbos, shemesh havaya. Like it says, v'karasa l'Shabbos, you shall call Shabbos einig. Shabbos is a level of pleasure. Shabbos meir b'chinas einig ha'atzmus, einig ha'atzmi, the atzmus ein sof. And Shabbos radiates, it's like me'ein elam haba, me'ein of the future. It's not the full la'aseh, but in Shabbos radiates Einiga Atzmi, the core pleasure from Atzmus Ein Sof. So relatively speaking, we have these two stages today. We have the weekdays where you don't have that Gili of Shabbos, Einig Shabbos, but you do have a tzemoyin, a thirst, and the thirst through the 6 days of the week leads to the Einig, the revelation of pleasure on Shabbos, which is the pleasure of Atzmus Ein Sof. U'kamishon is boil il. Okay, he's connecting it back to volume 2 now. Be'inyan Gimel Sud is the Shabbos. There we spoke at length, learned at length the 3 meals of Shabbos. Shehein Bechinas HaTainug. All 3 meals are levels of Tainug, one higher than the next. Ubesuda HaGimel. And the 3rd meal. Ugili Bechinas Pnimius Atik. That's what we learned there. It's the highest level, Gili Pnimius Atik. Now just to make it clear, this is not talking here, Mamish as it is La'asid Love. La'asid on the future, it will be a permanent experience. Yom Shekule Shabbos. It'll be Shabbos all the time. But he's giving us a taste and saying that this concept that we're learning here, based on this idea of what the Shamish B'Shabbos and Merapa and Tzedakah L'Aniyim, that we have a taste of it. And what's the taste? Weekdays, where you feel more the thirst because you're not experiencing this earning. And then Shabbos is a level of divine pleasure, all the way to the 3rd meal, which is a Tainug Atzmi, like he explains there, Pnimius Atik. Okay, let's stop here for questions. Then he's going to explain the second half. Tzedakah L'Aniyim. Shemesh Tzedakah, yeah.
Look how we have something to look forward.
Excuse me? I didn't hear what you said. We have something to look forward to? Yeah, we always have something to look
I mean,
forward.
but this is really something to look forward to. I mean, you know.
Well, it's a very different life. Today, it's a life of, you can say spirituality is hard to come by. It takes a lot of work to reveal these levels. After thousands of years of our hard work, the glove will turn inside out and we'll see the hand, and the glove will only be an outer layer. Today, the glove dominates, meaning the material world is the dominant force, and we have to work hard to pierce the armor of materialism to see the spiritual energy within. And when we do, it creates thirst for it. You thirst for it. And in turn, that thirst does lead to Shabbos. So you have something, a taste of it. And L'Asad Love will be the full culmination. I will say this, I want to add this. You know, I think we mentioned that the thirst takes on many different shapes. And here he's talking, obviously, a person who's aware and comes to the awareness that it's the divine that he's looking for. The divine ayin, the thirst of the human being for transcendence and for deeper connection is the ayin eliki, all the way to Atzmus Ein Sof itself, as we're learning here. But for many people, for most people, the thirst manifests in ways that sometimes are even destructive. A human being is not satisfied with animal bliss. Every human being, by definition, is a restless soul. And that restlessness is always going to affect us. Different people respond to that restlessness in different ways. You know, I've talked about this a number of times. Every addiction, I'm going now on the Lu'umazeh. We talked about Midbar de Kedusha, there's also Midbar de Lu'umazeh. In the Lu'umazeh, in the other side, an addiction is a very profound attachment to the point of addiction to something that you can't free yourself from. But why would a person have such an addiction? What would cause that? It had to come from a very deep hunger, a lack of something. So we understand there are physical substances that are just addictive by nature, that once you become dependent on them, it's hard to separate yourself. Very difficult to detox. There's also psychological addictions, emotional addictions. But in the beginning of it, why would a person look for such a high? Because the spirit and the soul of the person is suffering and wants relief. Every pleasure-seeking person is looking for some form of relief. Now, relief doesn't always mean coming from pain. It could also be coming from lack, from a deprivation, from boredom. I'm bored. I need something to excite me. Why do we need something to excite you? Nothing in this world, not flowers, not plants, not animals. None of them seek these high levels of excitement that human beings seek. Yes, they need to breed, so they're implanted in them a desire or connection. So they say an animal in the heat needs that, but that's part of that process. But you don't see an animal just sitting around and saying, "Where am I going on vacation?" And I'm bored, and I need something to jolt me. You don't have that concept. The human beings, on the other hand, because Ner Hashem Nishma Sadam, because we're like a flame and a soul that's aspiring to and wants to connect to something greater than itself. So it's always flickering. It's restless. As I said, animal bliss doesn't work for a person. Even some people are trying to master the art. Not that simple, because the soul doesn't let you rest. So it creates angst, and angst can create anxiety. And then anxiety can be relieved in many different ways, in unhealthy ways and healthy ways. So the very idea of tzemoyin, of thirst, whatever that thirst is coming because of something. If a person was not thirsty, they wouldn't be looking for anything. They would never get attached to anything. Not healthy, not unhealthy. So the fact that we look for something to connect to give us a rush, to fulfill us, to satisfy us, to give us pleasure, whatever it may be, whether it's in the positive or the negative, is coming because there's something inside you that needs that, or else you wouldn't go for that. So if you think about it, the tzemoyin that he's talking about here, even though he's not saying this at all here, he's not talking about the negative, he's talking here on a positive, but if you think about it, it's coming from the midbar that we're in. If a soul was completely satisfied, like it is Lamaila, in Atzilus you don't have chelas ava. You don't have this love sickness. You don't have tzemoyin. You don't say tzoma l'cha nafshi in Atzilus. There's only a soul, shcheirani, that's in a state of darkness in the midbar. So eres siya v'oyev bli mayim, in a arid, desolate, dry land without water. That's the ones that cry out with thirst. So it's important to keep that in mind, because when you look around the world, you'll see this is everywhere. And maybe more today than ever in the context of opioids, and so on, because there's so much freedom and so much leisure and so much accessibility that's creating even a deeper, profound vacuums and voids inside of our souls. So we're looking for it in any possible way, and especially if you can get a quick fix, whether it's through physical objects, whether it's through voyeurism, through media, through television, through internet, whatever it is that will create that. But you definitely see people everywhere thirsty. I mean, that's it's my line of work. So I see it everywhere, literally everywhere. Question is the measure. Some people are distracted and they're getting it through. Some people get it through money, the pursuit of money, the pursuit of power, the pursuit of control, the pursuit of influence. There's many ways this manifests. It's everywhere, however. It's the nature of the human being. So what he's talking about here is the ultimate. What's the real root of the tzemoyin is for godliness. It's for truth. It's for the source of life. And this is what he's saying here. And that's what creates this deep thirst. And this deep thirst will ultimately lead to a person, in this case, from the chayil asava, to the shemesh havaya, the Shabbos gilui of einig and pleasure, the ultimate pleasure of pnimius atik and einig Shabbos in general. Just wanted to throw that into the whole discussion. But I will say this, what I've said here is more applied to this, not what the Rebbe Rashab is saying. I always point out whenever you ask things, so I want to make that clarification. Well, I'm not explaining something. What I just said, most of what I said does not say here. I just wanted to address it, because you look around, you say, one second, where do I see this thirst? So the thirst is everywhere. The Rebbe Rashab, however, is addressing thirst, obviously, in the healthy, positive way of these bonanus that leads us to the ayin, to the etzem, the tzama lecha, like he says, the verse, the tzama nafshi lelakim, masay ovevera pnei elikim, atzmus ein sof. So that's just to clarify that.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I have a question just on the metaphor. Shemesh Shabbos. I understand the tzedakah la'anim, because we are poor in the sense that we don't have that revelation, and so we miss it. We're sick, lovesick, as you said. So Shabbos is a day where you get more of it. So it's like the Eibishter giving us tzedakah, like having rachmanis on our neshamas and giving us higher giluim, so we can feel a little bit more how it's supposed to be. That much I got. I don't understand the Shemesh B'Shabbos. I'm looking at a mimer by the Alter Rebbe.
I just have to tell you, because firstly, what you just said is your own interpretation. If you're going to read a few lines more, he's going to explain Tzedakah La'aniyim, not the way you just said it. The Rebbe Shabbos didn't get to Tzedakah La'aniyim yet. Right now, he's only talking about Shabbos b'Shabbos. And the answer is that Shabbos brings Einig, whereas you don't have that pleasure in the weekdays. So that pleasure is the response to the thirst. That's how he's explained.
I understand. What's that have to do with Shemesh?
Shemesh Havaya. Shemesh Havaya, Mogan Elikim. Shemesh is a metaphor for Gilead Lakus. Shemesh Havaya. You see, it says Shemesh Havaya. You see?
Where?
On the line. Shemesh B'Shabbos Meir B'Chinish Shemesh Havaya.
Yeah, I was too busy looking at another mimer while you were reading. Start to understand
the ultimate processing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what he says, Shemesh Havaya. So Shemesh Havaya is the gili of Einig, especially in the three meals and then the third meal. He's going to soon talk about Tzedakah La'aniyim.
Okay.
So that's the gili of Shabbos. Yeah.
Sorry for getting ahead. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does this raise in your mind the mimer by the Alter Rebbe and Likutei Torah Parsha Zois Bracha? Zois Bracha? It seems
I've been so trained that I don't look anywhere else until I understand what it says here, because I find when I did that in my earlier years, it just confused matters and ended up not understanding anything. So I would advise, I'm not telling you what to do or anyone what to do, but I would not bring other things till we understand first pshat here.
Okay.
Even the Maimorim he's citing here, I want to look into, obviously, because I want to see what it says there. But the first thing is to try to understand clearly here, and then you start looking other places and seeing either more explanation or sometimes you even find contradictions, and definitely can help understand things. I'm not against it all, but I just know from my way of going, first you have to absorb, then you process. And the absorbing is first listening. What does he say here? Look, right here, again, it's not to criticize. You missed the word Shemesh Havaya because you were looking somewhere else. That's a perfect example. No damage done, and it's perfectly fine. Many times I learn something and I'm not focusing properly, and that. So, but it's usually helpful to try to understand what it says. Now, sometimes it's hard to understand pshat also, so then you have no choice and you have to start looking elsewhere just to be able to understand. But it's just an easier way. I find it's a long, short road, but it ends up being short. Long as it takes more time because you look here, you understand. I'm frankly not confused, but I'm not clear a few things here. What does it say in the mimer in Siddur and Likutei Torah on top of the page? What does it say by the ayin and the yesh? And when he says Lefia Mavur Khan, that's still, I need to clarify, and I'm going to look it up. But meanwhile, trying to understand what he says here. And the next piece is about Tzedakah La'aniyim. Okay. Let me see here. Are there any other questions? Let's get questions. Are there any other questions? Also, it's also interesting. The Pasuk in Malachi says, Zorcha lachem, which is like a sun. Zorcha means like the sunrise. It'll shine for them. Yirei Shmi, those that revere my name. Shemesh Tzedakah. Sun Tzedakah, umerape become fair. And he heals with his wings, which talks about how the sun is a healing agent. It's the Gemara that turns it into Shemesh b'Shabbos and Tzedakah La'aniyim. So I'm going to look up also the Gemara and Tainus to understand exactly what's the pshat in the Gemara and how the Alter Rebbe or how the Rebbe Shab is explaining it here. There's a few more things to do research on, but so I think we'll stop. 1 second, let me see. Yeah, I'm going to stop here because the next section is going to go for a while, well, at least for a good few lines, into Tzedakah. Then he's going to come back to Shemesh Tzedakah, Shemesh b'Shabbos Tzedakah La'aniyim. Yeah, and then you're going to go back to B'midbar Asher Isa. Oh, interesting. Okay. So I'm going to stop the learning now. On inside right here by this line. The line Chulu will be finished Pnimius Atik about Shabbos. Any further questions? Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment, Rabbi. One of the things I was thinking about when I said something to look forward to, all of these people like myself who are aging, who don't really know what's to look forward to, right? I mean, ultimately, if you can instill all of that into all these people, that they can do some work right now, that is something to really look forward to. Is that weird? I mean, I'm just saying
It's
that.
not weird. First of all, I didn't know you were aging, but
Thank you. I'm not. But what I want to say,
but I understand your point. I think it's not weird at all. Listen, I think at any age, a person always needs something to look forward to, but it could very well be, it's true, as you get older and more mature, and you've seen things in life. You had your conquests, you had your ups and downs. Looking forward, absolutely. I mean, I sat at the feet of the Rebbe, where I saw a man, 90 years old, that had enthusiasm like a 10-year-old in his vision for the future, Mashiach, and in general, as long as we did not transform the world into a world of Elikus and Mola Oretz Deis Hashem, he was, you saw clearly, Chelas Ava, if you wish, a form of tremendous longing and yearning that I never saw anywhere else on that level, especially for godliness, to be able to cry for God almost on a daily basis. So yes, I saw that. So in that context, absolutely, that's what it's about. That makes you alive. You're alive and kicking, and you're not allowing your spirit to die or to flounder or to in any way wane. A very live spirit, the sparkle in the eye, and seeking. I only wish it upon myself and all of us to have that type of drive. And yes, when you learn Chassidus, I remember when the Rebbe came out in 1981, in honor of his father, actually, Chafov, Tiferes Kenim Levi Yitzchak, came out in a blistering attack against the whole concept of retirement, where retirement, he said, what's retirement? Retirement is basically like throwing in the towel, that you're ready to die, you're just preparing. The idea that, fine, he did not acknowledge retirement. I'm talking about retirement from exertion and from heavy labor and heavy lifting and work, but the idea of retiring the spirit and he spoke so much about the resource, the precious treasures and resources that older people have, that's completely like almost ignored by corporate America and so on. You really want them to retire, and the young come in to take over. The amount of experience they have, the amount of knowledge, the wealth of that, and that there's so much to tap into. And that's when he established the kollalim for older people to learn and to keep their minds and hearts and souls stimulated, and not to just wait around and give in, so to speak, to the aging bodies. So obviously this was not ignoring the fact that obviously you can't move as fast and you can't do a lot of things that you did when you were 20, when you're 80. But nevertheless, the spirit has much to give, whether it's in form of education or inspiration or counseling or mentorship. I mean, you can create, I think even there's a financial opportunity. You can create a tremendous amount of mentorship and coaching and direction and guidance from people who may be deep in their 70s and 80s and 90s even. I mean, so in that sense,
just imagine.
when you look up, you look up the ladder and you see what is still possibilities. You talk about Mashiach, you talk about a better world and everything we're learning here, for sure. That's how I would interpret what you're saying.
Totally. Thank you, Rabbi. But I mean, look how wonderful what we lack today, because we don't have these communities anymore. I guess, people gathering the young and the old together.
Look, when you worship materialism, then basically retirement means, okay, I've saved enough money to be comfortable now, to travel a bit, to hang out. I don't have to rush to work. it creates a very, what's the word for that I'm looking, a lethargic mindset. And neshama thinking does not. It's the exact opposite. Yeah,
Right.
lethargy is a good
Right.
word.
I'm going to work for you when I finish my job that I have now.
Well, I welcome partnering with you. You have to change the world, because the goal here is also not just for us to bring this to the people who are distracted. You're talking about those that are aware that they need this. What about the 20, 30, 40-year-olds that are so much in the rat race, they think they may have it made. They don't even realize.
Totally. No, but I'm saying if you give this to the people who, have time on their hands, if you will, they then can then trend to the.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today in our culture, the older people are, sort of
last week, I think 2 weeks ago, I did a class on fighting ageism. Yeah, old people are looked at as a liability, basically.
Right.
We're not going to kill them, but they're essentially they're looked at as draining resources, medical resources, health resources, and sure, I read an article by some young smart aleck who said that if we eliminated the elderly, he didn't mean it, God forbid, in a literal sense, but he's just saying hypothetically how much more money we would have and how much more resources we would have, how much is being spent, by insurance companies and medical expenses on the infirm. Yeah.
You say
I have a question about I don't want to interrupt Robin. I don't know if you had any more, Robin.
I'm sorry. I'm going to be quiet.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just, before the time runs out.
We moved a bit outside of Ayin Beis. We're talking now more application, obviously. But
of course.
Okay.
Well, mine is also more Chassidus applied, but it's on the Indian of Cholasava, love sickness. And on the one hand, it can drive one toward Elikus and the thirst for godliness, which is what he's talking about here. I also wonder to what extent, if it talks about it, and Imaimarim, the Indian of like depression, like Cholas Ava, like you sort of go the other direction. Like, what's the point? I'm so lost. I'm in such a dark place. Yes, I can study Chassidus and I can study Torah, and I can delve, but it only gets you so far. You're still not going to get. I mean, yes, you can get closer. I don't want to diss it at all. Please don't misunderstand me. But I do think it can also lead to depression. And I know that depression is a feeding ground of the Yetzer Hara, and how much Chassidus Chabad, rails against depression. But I'm just wondering, this Cholas Ava, it talks about leading to depression,
Yeah, and worse. I mean, you never hear people who say love has driven them insane. People become obsessed with somebody or with something, and I'm not talking about in Kedusha at all. That, someone falls in love, is infatuated to the point of insanity. They'll do things that are completely irrational, even destructive, even murder, right? We know that. So you're saying depression. I'm taking it even further, if you like, So my response is what I said earlier, that love itself, the very drive of love, the obsession of love, can lead you to great places, to do things that are tremendously noble and beautiful. And especially when you understand that love originates for your love for God. But that same love can go the other direction, like anything, like fire. Fire warms, heats, brings us so much of life is you need warmth and fire. But fire uncontrolled, what happens? Completely consumes and destroys. So the love of fire, the fire of love, or love of fire, fiery love can lead someone to the worst possible place as well. Like he says in the Basi Legani Maimer, Ruach Shtus, there's Shtus the Kedusha, there's holy insanity, going crazy for God. I mean, in a good way. Obsessed with godliness, which is not with yourself, obviously. And then could be obsession with yourself or obsession with something complete klippa and lumazeh. Take sexuality. Sexuality is the source of the highest things. The only way to become one with another, the only way to bring life into this world, the only way to be one with God. Based on the Torah that says, the pasuk that says, God created male and female and separated them. When they come together, they come together and create one full image of the divine. But then look what sexuality can do on the other end. I don't have to elaborate what it does and everything that it brings. So I think it's understanding, it's coming from the same root, but it can go in two opposite directions. That's how I would frame it. Actually, I will say that back then in volume 2, where he spoke about Chelas Ava, he actually brought a Gemara. Here we are. On the bottom of page 1200. He brought a Gemara from Sanhedrin that talks about that negative Chelas Ava, where you're seeing somebody that has, he brings a negative form where somebody says that if I don't have this and this woman, I will die. And the Talmud says, bottom of page 1200.
Okay.
So he talks about that's the Chelas Ava in the negative side. So that's the only thing I would add to this. Okay.
Thank you. No, that was very helpful.
So